Right now on NJ Spotlight News, is the Habba saga over? A Pennsylvania judge ruled that Alina Habba has no legal authority to serve as the state's U.S. attorney, so now what?
It seems like what we heard last night from Alina Habba and from the Attorney General were comments that they're going to continue fighting this, and no suggestion that Alina Habba is going to step aside.
Plus, Hurricane Aaron barreled up the Jersey coast, causing major flooding along the shore and forcing some residents to evacuate. Also, addressing the energy crisis, Governor Murphy signs legislation to bring more solar power onto the grid to try to reduce your electric bills. And a community in crisis. Ukrainian refugees here in the state share their hopes and fears for their country as meetings show little progress towards peace.
Buckle up and get ready for another year or two of this war. I mean, there's not too many people talking about this. But realistically, when you look at this, there's nowhere near to the end.
NJ Spotlight News begins now.
From NJPBS Studios, this is NJ Spotlight News with Brianna Venozzi.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us on this Friday night. I'm Brianna Venozzi. We begin with a few of today's top stories. First, some of New Jersey's largest universities are staring down major cuts in federal research money after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on Thursday that the Trump administration can, for now, cancel more than $780 million in grants from the National Institutes of Health that the government argued was slated to be used for projects in diversity, equity, and inclusion, along with gender ideology, studying vaccine hesitancy and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The 5-4 decision overturns a lower court ruling, but also leaves in place a separate ruling that says the administration's policy for ordering those cuts was probably unlawful and shouldn't be put on hold. It's a tangled web of court orders, but it means this is not the end. There is more litigation to come. Grants already canceled likely won't be reinstated, but now those recipients can sue in specialized court. Princeton University, for example, has a lot at stake after the Trump administration gave the school the least amount of NIH funding out of all the Ivy Leagues last year at $58 million. Also tonight, an update on the case of the double murder-suicide involving a New Jersey state trooper. The families of Lauren Semanchik and Tyler Webb, who were killed in their Hunterdon County home earlier this month by the trooper Semanchik had been dating, are suing local and state police over their deaths. That's according to attorneys for the families and as first reported by NJ.com. The family of Semanchik has said repeatedly that she went to police for help after her ex, Lieutenant Ricardo Santos, began stalking and harassing her, but her attempts for help went unheard. Well, earlier this week, authorities released a voicemail Semanchik left for Franklin Township Police in May, where she asked about filing a police report or restraining order, but was never called back. At a news conference on Thursday, attorneys said Semanchik also reached out to one of Santos's colleagues at the state police for help, to no avail. The Hunterdon County Prosecutor's Office took control of the Franklin Police Department a few days after the murders. And in our Spotlight on Business report tonight, renewable energy gets a boost in New Jersey, and your electric bill could too. Governor Murphy today signed a pair of bills that'll expand access to community solar programs and allow for more battery storage, potentially bringing down long-term electricity costs for residents here. The new law directs the state to open registration for another 3,000 megawatts of community solar capacity, eliminating a previous cap, meaning some 450,000 residents, including half who are low income, will be able to participate in and benefit from solar energy without having to install their own solar panels. Now, the other piece of the legislation pushes New Jersey to reach 2,000 megawatts of energy storage by 2030, which the governor's office says is one of the most ambitious targets in the nation, enabling the state to capture energy during low demand periods and release it when the grid needs it most. Utility bills have been skyrocketing this summer after an energy auction triggered a statewide rate hike averaging 20%.
Support for the Business Report is provided by the Newark Alliance presents the 2025 Halsey Fest, featuring the vibrancy of Newark's Arts and Education District and Halsey Street. Halsey, a neighborhood built on hustle and heart. The 2025 Halsey Fest schedule is available at halseynwk.com.
And coming up, is the Habba saga over? A Pennsylvania judge deals a massive blow to the president's pick to be New Jersey's U.S. attorney.
Funding for NJ Spotlight News provided by the members of the New Jersey Education Association, making public schools great for every child. RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together. New Jersey Realtors, the voice of real estate in New Jersey. More information is online at njrealtor.com. And Orsted, committed to delivering clean, reliable, American-made energy.
A major legal shakeup is rocking New Jersey's federal court system after a Pennsylvania federal judge ruled on Thursday that Alina Habba, the former personal lawyer for President Trump, has been serving without legal authority as acting U.S. attorney for New Jersey. The ruling disqualifies her involvement in ongoing cases and deepens concerns over how the Justice Department is handling top prosecutor appointments. Judge Brand's decision came after several people charged with federal crimes in New Jersey challenged the legality of Habba's tenure, and the controversy raises questions about presidential power and the independence of prosecutors. For more on all of it, I'm joined by Jacob Elberg, a Seton Hall law professor who also served for more than a decade in New Jersey's U.S. Attorney's Office. Jacob, really appreciate your insight on this today. I'm just going to start with the basics. Why did Judge Brand rule that Alina Habba is serving unlawfully in this role right now?
But the judge's decision was dealing with two statutes and had to get into some pretty complex and detailed issues involving the operation of those two statutes and their language. But at the heart of it is the constitutional concept of separation of powers and checks and balances, and what's written right into the Constitution, the idea that the presidential appointment power is still subject to that checks and balances, advice and consent. And so we've had a couple of statutes in operation about how you basically deal with what ends up happening, which is the president has the ability to make an appointment subject to the advice and consent of the Senate. Since that doesn't always happen so fast, doesn't always happen so easily, there needs to be rules in place for what happens in the meantime so that we don't have offices just not functioning. So we've got these two statutes that deal with that, and the judge ruled that the way the administration was trying to use those statutes was essentially trying to do an end run around that advice and consent concept from the Constitution, and that following those statutes means she's not lawfully in the position.
I also found it interesting that the Judge Brand noted that her tenure didn't end on July 22nd or July 26th, as we were all trying to figure out, that actually the interim role began when the president put another person in before her. How does that affect all of this? Because that plays into sort of the executive branch's ability to tap and have someone serve at their discretion, no?
Yeah, and that goes right to the way those statutes operate. And so one of them, to deal with that issue I mentioned before about how you deal with the fact that advice and consent might not happen right away, one of those statutes has a provision that says the president can appoint for 120 days somebody to act as an interim U.S. attorney. And so what the administration here had tried to do was essentially stack those on top of each other to say, well, we had this one guy for a period of time. Now we've got this other person for another period of time. And the judge says, look, that's not what the statute is doing. It's not what by its specific language allows. And if it did allow it, we wouldn't have the checks and balances, because if it did allow it, an administration would be able to just keep appointing folks 120 days at a time and never get that advice and consent.
What are the implications, Jacob, for ongoing cases in New Jersey, and does it put any prosecutions in jeopardy?
So it really depends on how the administration reacts at this point. The judge had at the hearing made the suggestion that given what was going on, that Alina Habba should recuse herself, should step aside and let somebody else be running the office who clearly would have the authority until this is resolved. And if that were to happen now, then the office would be able to function as it should. It doesn't appear, though, to be what the administration is going to do. Instead, it seems like what we heard last night from Alina Habba and from the Attorney General were comments that they're going to continue fighting this, and no suggestion that Alina Habba is going to step aside. And that means that whatever happens in cases at this point is really at some risk of being reversed.
Yeah, I mean, the criminal defendants who challenged her legal authority, the judge did ask that she recuse herself from prosecuting those cases as well. But I mean, you spent 11 years as an assistant U.S. attorney. I mean, inside this office, what type of upheaval does it have or not have on the day-to-day goings? Because, I mean, you all are used to working under Democratic administrations, Republican administrations, right? I mean, it's supposed to be non-political.
Yeah, and it's important not to lose sight of that. And the office was and still is filled with dedicated public servants who are working hard in a nonpartisan way and going about their jobs to try to protect the people of New Jersey and beyond. It's a real problem, and that they just, first of all, the leadership uncertainty in any organization is a significant challenge. But here it's worse than that, because these cases are hard enough, the job is hard enough, without dealing with the potential that cases may be viewed as not legitimate because of her involvement and the fact that she's unlawfully in the position.
Let me ask you, in the little bit of time we have left, you mentioned the Justice Department is poised to appeal. An appeals process will play out. What might that look like?
So that remains to be seen, because some of that is going to be up to the Court of Appeals and maybe even eventually the Supreme Court. So the next step would ordinarily be the Third Circuit, where a panel of judges would consider the issues. That's the sort of thing that in the ordinary course takes a long time, and briefing and scheduling and those sort of things. There may be a request here. You could imagine a request here to expedite that, but what that will turn out to mean in practice remains to be seen. And then from there, whether this ends up at the Supreme Court is also something we could be looking at down the road.
Jacob Elberg is a law professor, faculty director at Seton Hall Law School, also spent 11 years, as we mentioned, as assistant U.S. attorney in the office in New Jersey. Thank you so much for your perspective. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Hurricane Aaron stirred up serious trouble along the Jersey coastline over the last 24 hours, despite never making landfall here. From dangerous rip currents to street flooding and beach erosion, towns up and down the shoreline are battling the storm's powerful coastal aftermath. With some beaches remaining closed, swimming still off limits, and residents in Egg Harbor Township on edge after being evacuated due to flooding late last night. For local leaders, the bigger worry now is the long-term toll. Senior correspondent Joanna Gagas has more from Monmouth County.
We've had quite a rough surf here for the last 3 days. This is the third solid day of rough surf. We had the beach closed now for 3 days, like many towns up and down the Jersey Shore.
For most people along the shore, Hurricane Erin didn't bring much more than big waves and beach closures. As the sun came out today, lifeguards had their hands full keeping people out of the water, reminding them it's still a code red, or a double red flag as they call it, meaning absolutely no swimming.
You look at how beautiful the day is today. The last few days of summer, it's hard to tell people no on a day like today. But, this is a very dangerous surf right now, and it doesn't look too friendly, and I'm glad of that. But if you get caught in a rip in this, it is not an easy thing to get out of. So we are advising no one in the surf.
We're letting people maybe get their feet wet. Lifeguard stands are all open, beaches open, but we are not letting anybody in the water throughout today.
If someone is in the water, I see surfers, will lifeguards make a rescue if needed?
Absolutely. That's why they're here. We're here tonight till 7 o'clock.
Does that put them in jeopardy?
Yes, it does. I mean, they're highly trained and everything, but anytime you go into water with these surf conditions, it does put them in jeopardy. And unfortunately, people don't listen to the warnings or anything, and they still try to get in.
For some beach towns, chasing people out of the water will be the worst of the storm. But for others, flooding and beach erosion are the more stark reality. Some towns last night saw waves crashing over the seawall onto the street. Belmar had water coming up to the beachheads, and streets were flooded throughout LBI.
That wasn't from rain bands associated with the storm, but it was really the coastal impacts. The beaches, the water came up to the berm, came out into the streets at high tide on Thursday evening, still may go out into the streets at high tide on Friday evening. The water heights down in Cape May came just within a couple of inches of being considered a major coastal flood.
New Jersey state climatologist Dave Robinson says the impacts of Hurricane Erin will be long-lasting.
That storm really churned up the Atlantic, and it's going to take some time for it to calm back down. So people along the coast are still going to have some high tides as we go Friday, even into Saturday, rip currents for sure, and some pretty good wave heights. I mean, we had 10-foot wave heights along and near the coast.
Good for the surfers, bad for the shore. Several towns had significant beach erosion, like Upper Township in Cape May County, where the mayor said part of his coastal town simply has no more beach. On the northern part of New Jersey's shore, Monmouth Beach Mayor Tim Summers is concerned about the amount of sand his town lost this past week.
We know for sure we've lost about 50% of the beach we currently we had about 72 hours ago. So some of that sand may migrate back, but we know that through history we understand when we lose this much, we don't normally see it come back in total.
Monmouth Beach is considered an erosion hotspot and has worked with the Army Corps of Engineers over the years to replenish its beaches, especially here, where even last night the waves crashed right up to the base of this high-rise housing complex. A spokesperson for the Department of Environmental Protection said the office expects to begin post-storm inspections of beaches tomorrow, focusing on areas that typically experience erosion. And Republican Congressman Jeff Van Drew said he's been in touch with federal agencies so that if there is any damage along our shore, we will have the resources and support we need. But Summers says FEMA budget cuts have him worried they won't get relief.
Some 3/4 of the funding has been stripped away from this year's Army Corps projects. And so this is going to have an impact, not just in New Jersey, but all along the coast of the United States.
If you were planning on a beach weekend, there's still hope for the water to open up. Emergency management teams say they'll be out here early in the morning looking at wind conditions, whether the surf is coming down, and of course how strong the rip currents are. They know you want to be in the water, but safety has to come first. In Long Branch, I'm Joanna Gagis, NJ Spotlight News.
While Ukrainian refugees in New Jersey say they have mixed feelings about President Trump's flurry of meetings on Russia's war in Ukraine and the major obstacles that exist before the two countries reach a peace agreement. President Trump sounded positive earlier this week after meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and European leaders at the White House just 2 days after his summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska, where it appeared Trump was going to broker a meeting between Zelensky and Putin. But Russia poured cold water on those efforts after launching a rare drone and missile attack on an American plant in western Ukraine Wednesday night, then telling NBC News no meeting is planned. Meanwhile, here in New Jersey, our senior correspondent Brenda Flanagan caught up with refugees we've been following since the war began, and she joins us now to share how this latest news could affect their status. Bren.
Yeah, Brianna, we reached out to some folks that we've been covering in New Jersey's Ukrainian community and found 2 are actually back in Europe. We Zoomed with Yuri Boyechko, who heads a nonprofit called Hope for Ukraine. They collect donated clothing and food, medicine and toys, pack it all up in Jersey and ship it to the beleaguered nation and distribute it there. He says it's been an emotional roller coaster and that the ride's not over.
And so I think my message to everyone here in New Jersey is buckle up and get ready for another year or 2 of this war. I mean, there's not too many people talking about this, but realistically, when you look at this, there's nowhere near to the end.
Now, Boyechko's kept a close watch on the war. He pointed to Russia's continued attacks with missiles and drones, despite ongoing diplomatic negotiations involving Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, and several European heads of state. He noted after meeting with Putin in Alaska, President Trump backtracked on the need for a ceasefire because Putin refused, to no one's surprise.
And the reason why there's no ceasefire, because Putin doesn't need it. You know, he feels really comfortable where he is right now. Number one, he still have money to pay for the war because there's no sanctions being applied. Number two, he gets backed in by China and other of his allies, such as North Korea, Iran. Number three, he believes he has a friend in the White House that he can really, you know, play cards with.
Boyechko says Russia even attacked a U.S.-owned electronics factory in Ukraine, even though it reportedly doesn't build military products. As for peace talks, Russia's foreign minister recently shot down European proposals to shield Ukraine under a NATO-like guarantee of security. So Boyechko doesn't expect much now, even though Trump's trying to set up meetings between Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
And I think there was a big mischance by President Trump that he did not apply those sanctions he promised, because then he would have a bargaining chips on the table, whether he met with Putin in Alaska or these guys met in Washington, D.C., because what Putin's doing right now, he doesn't want to get President Trump upset, so he's going to keep doing these meetings. And you'll see, this meeting is going to go on for the next 6 months.
Now, we also corresponded with Paramus resident Yana Braun, who arrived in Ukraine this week to visit her family. Her parents have refused to leave despite the war. She spent Wednesday night in Lviv in a bomb shelter with 30 other people during that harrowing Russian attack, while 540 drones and 40 missiles pummeled Ukraine. Yana emailed me from the bomb shelter. How delusional one should be to believe that Putin wants peace. She described an elderly man who was crying and saying, "The world is so big, why nobody can stop him?" It was heartbreaking. A child was sleeping while her mom covered her ears so that she couldn't hear explosions. A woman was moving her lips, whispering a prayer. All the other people were staring at their phones, monitoring the attacks on a map. In 2 hours, most of them should go to work. This is Ukraine right now, sleep-deprived, scared, but with a desperate desire to survive. She'll soon be heading for Kyiv. Meanwhile, where's Boyechko? He's in Italy, where he ran 2 10-day summer camps for kids from Ukraine. The first group came from the eastern war zone, the second from western Ukraine, kids whose parents are soldiers either deployed or captured.
At the end of the day, I think these kids are the ones who are going to rebuild Ukraine. So if we're going to lose this generation, we're going to lose the country. So we're really focusing on really working with the kids right now and helping them understand that, you know, they're not alone.
Bree, he told me that the first couple of days, kids would run and hide whenever a plane flew over.
I mean, that imagery is so stark, especially what Yana described inside that bomb shelter, Brenda. What does this mean then for those who did escape the war, for those who came to New Jersey for their immigration status?
We're talking about thousands of people, thousands of Ukrainians who fled to the U.S. and here to Jersey over the past couple of years, could soon begin losing their humanitarian parole status as soon as this month. The president recently told a German news agency that he'd let them stay.
Will you let those Ukrainians who fled the war to stay in the United States until the war ends in Ukraine?
I think we will, yeah. I think we will. We have a lot of people that came in from Ukraine, and we're working with them.
Now, that was at the end of July. Moving forward, it's hard to say. Folks are worried because their status is temporary, their working papers could expire, and if they're deported, many say they have no home to go back to, Bree.
Yeah, it's a really fragile situation there. Brenda Flanagan, thanks so much.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for us this week. But a reminder, you can download our podcast wherever you listen and watch us anytime by subscribing to the NJ Spotlight News YouTube channel. Plus, you can always follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky to stay up to date on all the state's big headlines. And if you want to help support the programming public media brings you and keep stations like this one thriving, head to njspotlightnews.org/donate. I'm Brianna Vannozzi. For the entire team at NJ Spotlight News, thanks for being with us. Have a beautiful weekend. We'll see you right back here on Monday.
NJM Insurance Group, serving the insurance needs of residents and businesses for more than 100 years. Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association, and by the PSCG Foundation.
Public service is what we do. At the PSCG Foundation, through volunteer hours, partnerships, and our other contributions, we're committed to empowering communities. We work hand in hand with you, our neighbors, to educate young people, support research, environmental sustainability, and equitable opportunities, provide training and other services all over New Jersey and Long Island. Uplifting communities, that's what drives us, the PSCG Foundation.
For more than a century, New Jersey Realtors has worked to advocate for home ownership and private property rights. Whether it's your home or business, we work on the issues that matter, here in Trenton and in your neighborhood. As the voice for real estate in New Jersey, we support initiatives that safeguard home ownership, strengthen communities, and reinforce our economy. Learn more at njrealtor.com.